As we wait for the audio to play, maybe I can turn it over to the team who just want to provide a quick introduction to the work that you're doing on the ground. I don't know if Megan, Stephen, or Wendy, if you'd just like to say a few introductory words. Great, Wendy, I think we've got you on.
I think.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the difficulties with technology. I'm sure it'll come together quite soon. I wasn't supposed to be presenting, but I'll just jump in. So yeah, this session is about playful parenting through education technology. So it's a partnership between Viamo, World Reader, and World Vision, focused primarily on sub-Saharan Africa, where we're trying to really adopt a blended approach, where we bring together community organizations and faith leaders. We bring about Viamo technology, where we can send completely offline 1-2-3 messaging for parents that focus on play and positive parenting, and then also give digital access through a very simple World Reader app in which there is a collection of 150 activities around those books that parents engage in. So that's like the 30,000 foot introduction to this partnership. If we can get the video going, I'm sure we can get into more detail. We actually, just to be really clear, in Southern Africa, we are working as individual organizations. There's been Viamo and World Vision have been piloting already with the Viamo platform, but we are still working on keeping the final partnership together. So what you really see in the video is where we want to go, the direction we're going, and we can share evidence of where we are and why we feel that coming together brings value in these communities around parenting and around play.
Great. Wonderful. And check with Lisa, just to see if you've got the video back up.
We're going to try it one more time. Thanks everyone for your flexibility as we work through technical difficulties. Just a moment, I'm going to mute myself momentarily. I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to see if the audio is working. So Jackie, if you wouldn't mind continue to give me some feedback as I click through this, that'd be great.
Of course, and thank you very much, Wendy, for that very helpful intro. This is like the prelude on talk shows where we have the celebrities introduce the trailer before you see it. No, we couldn't.
Okay, I'm going to try it one more time with my. So 3, 2, 1. Let me know if you hear anything. Okay, are we hearing anything on your end from the video?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
So maybe what we'll do, if the team's agreeable, maybe I'll hand it over and we can talk through some questions from Wendy, Stephen, and Megan to explain a bit more. And what I'll do is I'll put in the chat the link to where everyone can find the video. And it very much is worth going to and watching under 7 minutes, and really gives you a nice overview of sort of the multi-prong approach that the team is taking towards engaging caregivers. So Stephen, I've seen you've popped on screen. So maybe do you want to introduce yourself a bit and explain a little bit more about your program?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's better if the link is put in the chat that we just kind of pause for 7 minutes and then answer questions after, but I'm also happy to kind of give the platform overview if that's a better place to start. What do you think, Jackie?
Let's give the platform overview. This is recording, and we'll do it kind of like a flipped classroom where you can go back and watch the video as well.
Okay, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Meyer, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Viamo. Hi, Elisa. the platform we're that we're proposing to use for this project is called 321. It's a general information livelihoods hotline available in 19 countries across Africa and Asia. We have had 7 million unique listeners so far in 2020 who have listened to 90 million messages. So this is content ranging from agricultural extension and health information to education. So for this proposal, we're having the educational content be available through 321, which is free to access for users, so they don't have to pay for airtime, and it's pre-recorded audio messages that users access by calling into a short code like 321, and they don't have to pay for airtime.
Great. And I understand also that it's a program that's bringing together a number of partners in different programs. So Wendy, I believe the Smarts Books program is also available. Do you want to touch on that as well?
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Sure, so World Reader is a global digital reading organization. We have a digital presence in about 42 countries, and then we also have on-the-ground programs in 12. So we focus on working with publishers, both very locally in country as well as internationally, to assemble and curate a collection of books that are appropriate for our learners. So we work from the early childhood space, and where we see that our work in a partnership with Viamo and World Vision is being highlighted, all the way through early grade reading and through youth. What we do is we digitize books, we get licenses to distribute those, and we curate collections. So for instance, for our early childhood work, which is what we're talking about today, we usually put together a group of 150 books, and then we develop very simple activities that you can do as a parent in the home around those 150 books. We also provide access to the collection in preschools so that we can enable caregivers and preschool teachers to also access these books. And then we work, as do a lot of EdTech organizations, with messaging. So we're able to send messages home to the parents to encourage frequent reading to your child. We've also incorporated, from an equity lens, we've begun incorporating more audiobooks so that even if parents can't actually read to their children, they can listen to stories. And we've also done interesting partnerships with radio stations, with community-based organizations to make sure that people can hear these stories, or that there are facilitators who can actually reach out either on a very individual home visitor model basis or in groups to more vulnerable families, where we know that the challenges around getting them to read to their children are quite important. Finally, I'll just mention that in terms of accessibility, we have both a web app and an app. We work phone, even the simplest kind of old-fashioned flip phones that many of our users in sub-Saharan Africa use. So we really try to make sure that we can make access to our books simple. We also work with many telecommunications companies to have 0 rating on our books, so that it is not, if they are using the web app and they are actually online, they're not being charged for any reading that we're doing. And finally, I'll just say that we get data on the back end. So one of the great things, I mean, there are lots of reading programs, lots of programs where you can send books home, but what we get is data. We can actually get some visibility as to who's reading and who's not reading, which I think is a really important aspect to any program as it scales. When you move from really small high touch interventions to very scalable interventions, well, those touch points are fewer and perhaps more far between. And so we think that data allows for visibility and that ability for the program to tweak itself. So I'm just going to pause there. That's a little bit about World Reader and sort of what.
Perfect. And I'm going to go to Annalisa next, because I think you're one of the people that are featured in the video. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about also why you focus so much on caregivers in terms of your response to COVID.
Thanks, everybody. I apologize for some technical difficulties on my end. Yes, I'm Elisa Phillips. I'm coming from World Vision, and we do a lot of work with parents and caregivers just in our preschool programming, early learning, regular the basic education, school-going age children, and there's a huge focus definitely on parents and caregivers as a child's first teacher. And we still have, we have that philosophy, which many of you I know as well have, and that we're looking for play as a way to connect the parent and the child. Especially during this time, that parent is the one that is with the child, and we want that parent. And if we're watching in the video, it talks about, if a parent is overwhelmed and does not have specific direction of what they want to do with their child, it's important that they feel empowered, that we can help to build that confidence. We talk a lot about trust and how to, for us to be able to do that, we have to have some trusted relationships within the communities to be able to access caregivers. So we feel it's very important to access parents, access caregivers, to work with them, because they are with their children and they often feel disempowered, especially if they don't have access to a teacher maybe regularly in a situation where there's a crisis, schools are closed, that they need to be able to have some confidence in that they have skills and abilities to work on things like creativity, how to help them problem solve, and just have fun. I think that's a big focus on why it's important for us to work with caregivers, that they see that learning is fun, it should be fun, and it's a part of how it's how children are going to learn. Because part of the, sometimes to some of the barriers in terms of the biggest buy-in is with parents, not so much, sometimes it's teachers, but sometimes the barrier is that parents may not buy into that play is important and that they have a role. So we really feel it's important to work with caregivers so they feel that they are able to practice some very simple techniques, simple messages. We don't want to make it very complicated, and simplicity is actually not simplicity in messaging, but that it is kind of bite-sized, something that they can pick up and run with and feel that, okay, my child is learning, I'm seeing some progress in my child, and there's joy. We talk about, on this conference, we're going to talk a lot about joyful learning, the importance of that.
Thank you so much for that. And I do think our technical team thinks the video might work. So we're going to give it one last shot, and then we're going to go on to the next presenter. And what we'll do is we'll give an intro into all of the different presentations, and then we'll come back to each of you for further conversations with the group. So let's try one last time with the video.
Okay, we're going to try one more time from the website. Let me know if you can hear this, and then if you can't, I'll go ahead and make it large. Is the sound for the video coming through as you see that?
No, unfortunately not, sorry.
Let me try one more. Change anything on the sound?
No, apologies.
Okay. Well, you're doing a great overview. We'll go ahead and continue.
All right. Well, with that, if it's all right, to the Playful Parenting team, we'll go to the next presentation, and we'll come back to you guys for a bit of a discussion with the group. And just a reminder for those that are tuning in online, if you do have questions to the team, please go ahead and put them into the chat, and we're going to open it up for a conversation. And what I would also suggest is that you do take note of the link that we had here in terms of where you can find all of the videos, and spend some time to go through them, because they'll give you a really good detailed overview that you'll hear in this presentation as well, but actually get to see some of the games that you'll hear about next actually in action. So Aamer, do we have you online as well and able to come on and turn your video on?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I wonder if I could pass it over to you for a quick introduction and overview of what your program is and how you've been responding to COVID.
All right, Jackie. So what we have done is that we firmly believe that one, you cannot stop kids from playing games on their devices these days. So my product, KarMuqabla, was founded on the premise that if you cannot stop kids from playing games, why not change the game? Why not create games that are based on their educational content? And the second thing that we were very convinced of when we started off our work was that no matter how much the teacher asks the student to study, no matter how much pressure the parents put on the student to study, the student has to want to learn if they're going to make the kind of progress that is expected of them by their parents and teachers. So that is why we took the entire national curriculum in Pakistan and we turned it into one big national game, which is essentially the larger part of that game is essentially a quiz-based game where when kids play to a common leaderboard, they can see that who is at the top of the leaderboard and where they are and how much further they have to climb to get to the top. And when we ran a trial, we saw how engaged the students were. Since we were a startup, we had very limited resources with which to promote our product. So just using social media and all that, when we spread it around, we had responses from over 32 cities in Pakistan and from 96 different schools, as well as lots and lots of students, hundreds of students who did not mention which school they belong to. And on our quizzes, basically, they are 3 minutes in duration. So it takes very little time for a student to finish a quiz. Doesn't take a lot of device time. And from the data that we got from that gameplay, we could see that on the average, a student has played about 15 to 20 games in a day, which is about an hour of play at the most. But what is really very, very useful about this thing that based on that gameplay, we can provide the parents and teachers with very detailed analytics of where their child stands in what subject. And we can even pinpoint that, okay, here's this kid in this little city who's fantastic in science, or this kid in this little town is really wonderful in geography. Not only that, we can track their progress over time and we can alert teachers and parents that this guy was really, or this girl was really strong in this subject a couple of months ago, but they seem to be slacking off. As you have hit this topic, they don't seem to be particularly interested in this. So on the one side, we engage the students with their games, and on the other side, we provide parents and teachers with the data that is generated by the gaming, their gaming, so that they understand their child's potential. And then in between, there are lots of little games that are built that the results of all of those games feed into one common leaderboard. So no matter what game the child is playing, what subject he's playing in, how much time he's spending, everything he does on that actually leads to some kind of analytics for the parents and the teachers, which help them understand where their kid stands. So that's just about, sorry, I think I've taken longer than I should have, but I thought that I should give it a proper
No, that's very helpful. And we've got a little bit more time to spend diving into your specific program. So I'm wondering if you could actually touch on, during COVID, what changes you've seen, how you've had to sort of adapt communication out, have you seen increases in use? What are you seeing in terms of COVID and applications?
Right. Jackie, COVID took everybody by surprise, obviously, as it did the rest of the world. And in Pakistan, our familiarity with technology is essentially limited to a large extent, to a great extent. It's limited to using WhatsApp on mobile phones and all that sort of thing. So I often joke with people that imagine somebody who had invented the razor blade 2,000 years ago. Then the primary challenge for that person, for that inventor, would not have been to distribute or market that product properly. It would have been to try and explain to people that there's life without birds. Right? So in my country, here in Pakistan, technology is it's generally considered to be an add-on to the industrial model of a brick and mortar school. And there are very few schools who are willing to take this initiative on their own. So COVID did prompt them towards exploring technology, but a lot of time in that period was lost to a lot of schools, because essentially when they talked about technology, they were looking to replicate that classroom model and the classroom teaching in cyberspace, which for lots of reasons, poor connections, high data costs and all that, and the fact that sometimes there would be 3 students in a house and only 1 mobile device available to them. So the experiment with online, live online lectures, I think that crashed really, really badly, which is why we did see a spike in our usage. And we also were very quick to adapt in terms that we just had this gaming module ready, and which was powered by over 150,000 questions spread between grades 5 to 10 in 7 subjects between grades 5 to 8, and then another 3 at the senior level, which is grades 9 and 10. But we then quickly built a distance learning module into our website, which would allow teachers to set assignments for their students, which would allow them to assign particular quizzes for their students according to how they were progressing their education. And at the same time, mind you, there was a lot of confusion in Pakistan. There wasn't a clear-cut policy. There was a lot of confusion. A lot of the people, I think a majority of the people, were quite convinced that, okay, schools are going to reopen in 2 weeks. So maybe another 2 weeks, maybe another week or so. So there was no concerted effort towards this thing. But when that thing progressed, when the lockdown carried on and on and on, we started seeing a spike in the interest that people were taking in KarMuqabla, which is our website. And KarMuqabla is an Urdu word which literally means compete. So it is encouraging students to compete through games. And now, given it also gave us a really, really good opportunity to assess what parents were expecting from digital technology. A lot of them were convinced that delivering live online lectures for 30, 40 minutes, as is the case in a brick and mortar classroom, that was not going to work online. So what we are now working on are gamified books that borrow their content from the national curriculum, but it is gamified in a way so that each and every chapter and each and every topic within that book, the kid can gets to see illustrated lectures that we are producing, and as well as play little games to help them with. And when it comes to teaching, we don't believe in that model where one technology company can hire a set of teachers and produce X number of lectures, and then those lectures are provided for everyone. What we offer to our affiliate schools is that here's our studio, here are our facilities, here's our technology facilities and all that. Please come and build your, what we are calling it is build your school. So build your own digital content for your school. You don't have to rely on us. You don't have to rely on everybody else. So this was a major adaptation that we had to make, but we're glad that we're doing it. And yeah, it's very challenging and it's a lot of fun.
No, that's great. And I think some experiences that I'm sure many people on the call have similarly shared in terms of both early adopters, some of the expectations early under COVID in terms of how to adapt programming. So we're going to come back to that discussion, but I want to bring in our next speaker from War Child Holland, Judith, who will talk to us a little bit about the Can't Wait to Learn. And I wonder if you can start by giving us an intro to Can't Wait to Learn, which is another sort of blended learning program, but also focus on what your experience has been like under COVID and how you've adapted your program.
Hi everyone. I'm actually here with Marva, and Marva could share the video that we recorded. Is that an idea?
Sure. Feel free.
Yeah. So I'm Judith Flick. Maybe introduce ourselves quickly. I'm the director of Can't Wait to Learn, which is a gamified education intervention. And the video will show, let's say, how we adapted it to COVID, and also you know, how it brought us closer to scaling it. And Marma,
yeah, I'm trying to sort it out.
Is she lives and works in Lebanon, and she in the video will see her talk about the response in Lebanon, even throughout, you know, even after the blast, which was another sort of small adaptation or adjustment we needed to make. So thanks to her and her team, we actually were able to reach quite a lot of children through the adapted version. Are you managing, Mara?
Yeah, just a second. So you're proposing me to show the video or the whole presentation, try sharing it from my screen? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. And
are you trying to present it? Share it?
Yes. Judith, you mean the whole PowerPoint or only the video?
The video that we recorded.
Yeah.
Hi, Judith. If you could mute your mic when you're not speaking, that would be great, because we're getting feedback through there. It's on the bottom panel. Okay, perfect. We're good now. Thank you. Mara, are you having difficulty sharing your screen? So the bottom panel at the bottom.
No, I believe now it worked. Okay. Yeah, I'm not able to share my screen.
okay, maybe we can just continue. Judith, if you can explain a bit more, you might have to come off mute again. And if you want to explain a bit more about the Can't Wait to Learn program.
Yeah, let's do it just this way. So Can't Wait to Learn is a gamified digital education device. Usually it's delivered in tablets, and the tablets will be handed to children in groups in safe spaces, centers or schools. And this was, of course, not possible during COVID, where children were confined to home. So we had a lot of people asking for Can't Wait to Learn because it's actually devised for, you know, difficult circumstances, but we weren't ready. I mean, the version that we had wasn't up to that. So we did different types of adaptations. In the first place, of course, we looked for more tablets, so we could hand tablets to children at home. And made sure that, you know, they're safe, so cleaned, and you know, at night they would come back very often to be charged. I hear echo somewhere. And then the other one, which is maybe more interesting, and that happened in Lebanon, and Marwa can speak a lot about, which is what we call sort of the intermediate solution, is to download some of the content, namely the videos with instructions and so on to the children on a downloadable link, place that on a website so that children can actually download it on their devices at home. So Marwa, maybe you can explain a little bit how you went about it.
Yeah, sure. And by the way, the screen works, so I don't know if we could still share the video. Is that possible?
I think for the sake of time, maybe let's just continue with giving the verbal updates. And then again, we've shared the link and we'll do it also at the end of the session so that people can go and see the video. But if you don't mind picking up on that piece about how you've been able to adapt the program in Lebanon.
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone, it's Marwa Zahir. I'm going to present Can't Wait to Learn's response to COVID-19 in Lebanon. As COVID-19 emerged, the context was as follows. There was temporary suspension of non-formal education programs, leaving 25,000 children in need of learning. However, the learning readiness assessment that was conducted in Lebanon has shown that 95% of the caregivers wanted non-formal education. Our beneficiaries are usually Syrian refugees and Lebanese children who are aged 10 to 14 years. We reach them through implementing partners all over Lebanon. This was the context in Lebanon, and our response was one solution does not fit all. So we delivered the content through a downloadable zip file via SD cards and USB sticks where there's no internet access. Our intermediate intervention, which is Can't Wait to Learn material on downloadable link, is based on a distant blended learning approach, which combines between downloadable educational material and books while having the opportunity of interaction between teachers and children through WhatsApp. The web page gives access to literacy and the numeracy packages, in addition to psychosocial support, child safeguarding, and the health awareness sessions. However, to come up with that, it took us a lot of efforts and work, like conducting needs assessment, developing and adapting the content, as well as training teachers, building their capacity, and doing monthly teachers' learning circles. Finally, before disseminating the material, we tested the link with 10 beneficiaries until we scaled up to, first it was 4,000, now it's 6,921 children only in Lebanon. However, we've been lately into a stage which no one expected, which is Beirut Blast. I believe many of you heard about it. We became eventually prepared to COVID, but not to Beirut Blast. We first thought it was only COVID, but in a few months we could respond to Beirut Blast through Can't Wait to Learn at home. To you, Judith.
To the third part, so we've had a lot of learning throughout this this journey, this downloadable link indeed has proven to be very scalable, very fast, and will be used in future also in combination with the tablet-based Can't Wait to Learn games. But it doesn't give the richness of the games, the interactive games themselves. So we're looking for another device in future. In order to be prepared for other emergencies. And this is actually also exactly what we want for scaling, which is what we call the global Can't Wait to Learn game, which is a mobile compatible game based on a sort of enhanced curriculum. And that's mapped against the local curriculum and can be sort of downloaded, through a website. That's basically our dream. And through these responses, one, they highlighted the issues that we really need to change fast in order to scale, and also got us a little bit in that direction. Just to give you a quick snapshot of that. And ironically, actually, the elements of Can't Wait to Learn and those that embody quality education are some of the elements that kept us from adapting it fast, such as local design and co-design with children, a curriculum in line and endorsed with the National Ministry of Education, tablet-based, preloaded to make it safe and child-friendly, and so on. So, for all of these issues, we now sort of think we have a solution, and I'd like to sort of, we are getting ready actually to implement that. So, for example, where we had sort of co-designed local, games for each locality, we're now looking for a game which combines the different elements of different local communities. the global curriculum, that enhanced curriculum, and the mapping against the national curricula will enable us to actually use that in almost all settings, we think, because it's has much more depth than the local curricula, and we can, very easily spot the gaps and talk to the ministries about how to go about those. Yeah, there's a lot of different things to be said, but I think I should stop here.
No, I think that was an excellent overview. And sorry, I'll just ask everyone to mute again so we don't have some of that feedback. But I think that provides us a nice entry point, also thinking about how programs have shifted, but also how we can use this experience under COVID as a learning experience to catalyze us into the next phase of our programming that can have sort of broader adaptation. So before we unpack that further, and I think lots of questions emerging here for the groups, I want to go to our last presenter, Kenneth Lim, who's going to give us a little bit of an introduction to his project, the SORBET project. And so Kenneth, if I can invite you up on screen and hand over to you, if you don't mind giving more of an introduction and walking us through what your program is about.
Sure. Thanks, Jackie. And hello to everybody here. And thank you to my preceding colleagues who presented. Jackie, I think you're doing a wonderful job of the time. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just talk you through. And I think, yeah, everybody's, all my preceding presenters have been talking about us, but I come from quite a different point of view because I'm not a startup and I'm just an academic in the university in Singapore. So Singapore is a pretty small place and we only have one teacher education college. So I belong to that teacher education college and I'm a research scientist there. So basically, what what I'd like to share with you today in terms of over the next 5 minutes or so is a response initiated by Singapore teachers who approached our team as the lockdown was imminent. So basically, I think the essential problematic that we were trying to address was that sometimes children will obey, but they may not necessarily buy in to the reason why they're exhorted to do something. So I'm referring to social distancing and the East Asian culture, to lapse into stereotype, is that of general acquiescence if somebody tells you to do something, especially an authority figure. So, so getting our children to practice social distancing is generally not too much of a problem, but we are actually trying to help them to understand, to have a more embodied understanding of the need to, so that they do it because they truly believe in it and not just because they're told to do so. So the teachers who approached my team back in the intervention I'm about to describe is entirely over the course of the past few months because it was initiated in March and we had our first trials in July and August. They were mathematics teachers and they were interested in helping children make the links between the diffusion of COVID and probability theory. So, so basically, what we did with how we helped the teachers was to design an immersive environment where the students through the avatars would interact with each other over a period of time, and unbeknownst to them, a virtual virus was actually being diffused around. And following the in-world activity, there would be a second half to the intervention where the teachers and the students would have access to the diffusion data through a web-based dashboard, and then they could like talk through basically we were trying to encourage them and afford them opportunities to see the immediate links between their decision making and their behaviors and the consequences thereof. By having it in an immersive environment, we were trying to leverage the theory of the general broad theory of embodied cognition, and the whole thing about I mean the literature based on video games and learning. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's it. But yeah. So the two problematics that we were trying to address was one, in regardless of which country we are living in, there is generally a time lag between our actions, our daily interactions, and the feedback from the authorities on our daily interactions. So there's a time lag of about 24 hours. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that when the feedback comes, it's not particular to us, but it's generalistic to the entire community or the population. So again, it's not a very meaningful feedback. So we know there are X numbers of cases from yesterday, but how does that relate to my particular choices yesterday? So those are the two problems. The third problem is that each person's understanding of what constitutes a safe distance varies, and it also is tacit to each other. So for instance, Jackie, if we were in real life, I could be like encroaching upon your understanding of social distancing without necessarily realizing it. So in the immersive environment, we try to address these issues, taking advantage of the digital nature of the. So basically, we are giving them a sandbox which is safe to fail and safe to experiment with regards different probabilities of infection. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's it. Yeah. Thanks, Jackie.
Cool. And I'm fascinated, and we still have a bit of time, so I'm wondering if you can already talk through what some of your findings have been or observations as you've seen people engage in this virtual space.
So thanks, Jackie. I won't take too long, and if I take too long, just cut me off. So the findings actually just came in last. Yeah. So basically, we in the first place we weren't able to do a very rigorous design because of all the protocols surrounding physical visits to the schools and so on and so forth. So but having, I mean, that caveat aside, we basically found that from the utterances of the students, the utterances could be classified into those which were ludic in nature, the play-based was social in nature, and I think there was another one which I can't remember, but these two tend to stick out in my mind, and also they're pretty relevant to the conference, of course. So I think I'll just give you an anecdote of what happened to a couple of students and how it stuck in their mind. So we tried in our immersive environment to give them more or less a suggested replica. I won't use the word replica, I don't really like it, but basically it's a suggested replica of a typical Singaporean environment. So actually what happened was the students got stuck in a lift because a lift is a very confined space. And yeah, so too many of them were crammed in and the lift stuck. And if you can imagine if this had to happen in real life, I mean, in the context of a pandemic, it would be quite distressing. So the conversations around getting stuck and the reflections upon their actions were pretty interesting, in the sense that some of them were reflecting, were expressing regret. Some of them were obviously, yeah. And there was one particular case where, let me see. So a pair of students actually, to use the knowledge building phrase of rise above, they actually rose above the actual situation, the immediate situation of getting stuck. And they went on to say something like, basically, imagine having no interactions. And then the other fellow said, and we didn't prompt them to say anything. So one of them said, imagine having no interactions with each other. And the other fellow responded, that would be the epitome of loneliness. Now, these are 13 and 14-year-olds in a regular state-funded school. They're not in an independent private school or anything. But for them to have that kind of existential insight into what constitutes loneliness, and it also reinforces that basically, I'm sure many of our colleagues already in this short conference have made the point that children are essentially sociable creatures, and they learn through play, and they learn through socialization. And the more opportunities we can afford them to do that, the better. Yeah, I'll mute myself now. Thanks.
No, thank you so much. I think that was a great illustration of just how impactful games can be in getting people to understand, well, in this case, the consequence of their actions, but also the experience that they're going through. So we're going to open up the discussion now. And so I'm going to invite all of the presenters. If you can also come back onto the screen. And one of the things that struck me in this session was just how much each of your programs really did focus. And I'm just going to ask people once more to mute, just as you're coming back on. Perfect. How much so many of the different programs focused on behavior change in one way or the other. And that could be behavior change trying to have teachers embrace this idea of learning through play, or trying to have a different reaction from caregivers or even from students. And what have you found particularly compelling about play in helping to stimulate some of those decisions or some of those shifts in how people act? So I wonder if I could go first, maybe to our World Vision team. Elisa, if you want to respond first, because you're really looking at sort of how through your program you can kind of have a change or a shift in how caregivers act, and really embracing this idea of play. So why do you think that's so important, and what elements of play do you find either conducive for stimulating that change, or maybe actually problematic?
I think you mentioned behavior change, and what we first have to think about is the entry point. How are we going to begin to engage the parents? So we think of play as something that is that will, contribute to learning, that it's not just something that's just fun. And one of the ways that we do that is we have a lot of trusted partners, and just who are your trusted networks? Who can you access that you believe would, give you information in the time of uncertainty or crisis? We work a lot with faith leaders, giving them they trust them that the message that they get from a faith leader is the accurate information. A lot of communities have different faith traditions. They trust the different leaders. And so we really try to look at who are those important influencers, get their buy-in in terms of play and what messages. Again, simple, we're learning that simple is really key. In terms of things that, the elements that are really, I would say, very conducive, or just, creativity, just being able to be creative, and just, I think I like what someone talked about, being able to make mistakes and have that it's a safe environment to create. So it's not always about, I have to have this particular learning objective, but let's create and have fun, and that we're still learning. So that's one of the elements that I think is more kind of tangible, that let's build together, let's create together, let's have fun.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that really builds off of the model that I've seen from the Can't Wait to Learn program, and this notion of building together, and you spoke about that as well. So I wonder if we could go to Judith. what's been your experience with computer change and sort of co-creation and those elements of play?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear entirely.
Sure, I think you have to go on mute also, just while I finish, because otherwise there's a bit of feedback. Perfect. All right. Oh, sorry, I don't think you're muted. Judith, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I couldn't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I couldn't hear your question entirely, but I think it's about stimulating parents, right? And the role of play in that. And I totally agree with what Alisa has said. I think Marwa can say a piece of, from own experience on this as well. I think what was nice, what I've heard back from different environments, nice about COVID is that parents were much closer to the learning of their children, forcibly, but they enjoyed it. It's not only children who enjoy games and learning in that way, but adults as well. And that helps stimulate, of course, the children. But I'm not sure if that answers your question. Maybe, Marwa, you've heard the question much better than me. You can say a few words about your practice.
Yeah, actually, I'll add to that. So we did a few weeks ago to test the effectiveness of Can't Wait to Learn at Home. It has shown that the caregivers were way more engaged than they used to be in the traditional schooling. They said that for the first time they experienced this parenting role, being involved more, supporting their children. Some of them expressed their interest in the program for how fun it was. They asked us if they could learn basic literacy and numeracy through the program, which is something that we're now looking into.
Great, thank you so much.
Did that answer your question, Jackie?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, thank you. And I wonder, Aamer, if we can pick up on that, because I know you talked a little bit about sort of the challenges within Pakistan in terms of people having access, but did you notice shifts also in the behaviors of not just teachers trying to replicate the classroom as you talked about, but also with parents and how they sort of began to look at maybe game-based learning in a different view?
Absolutely, Jackie. I think two very clear changes that we noticed from the feedback that we got. On the parent side, I think it has made this lockdown and kids being home all the time and some of the schools struggling with distance learning and struggling with technology and all that. I think it has made parents, a lot of the parents ask questions about the quality of the schooling that their child is getting that may never have occurred to them. So it was primarily because the situation had become so different that before the lockdown, the kid would leave home every morning, would not be there for the next 6-7 hours. And when they would come back, they would have standard set of homework to do and all that. And the parents' involvement was not to the extent that had to be there during the lockdown. So the parents became more aware of what the school was doing for the child and how they were doing it. And some of the schools in particular who actually, this was very interesting, that some of the schools that actually did succeed in using technology to deliver online lectures, parents became more aware of the quality of the teachers. And they started forming more informed and quite a definitive opinion about what the teachers were doing. And on the other hand, when we talk to schools, the schools, I think, woke up to one principal realization of how little they had invested in training their teachers, especially in using technology as a tool for imparting education. One, and two, where most of the school because we were there before COVID happened, and whenever we would approach a school and introduce our product to them, they'd find it very interesting. But almost every school looked at it as an add-on to what they were already doing, as an optional thing, that, okay, shall we go with it or shall we not go with it? How is it going to benefit? How does it tie in with the fee structure? Can it help us, charge a bit more, or whatever questions they had in mind. But now, the schools that have come into contact with us during COVID and are now preparing to start working directly with us in generating content for their schools, they are now no longer looking at it as an add-on. They're looking at it as a necessity, something that their school must have, or it will very likely lose out to those schools that are quicker in responding to technology. And I know that a lot of you may not be aware of the situation when it comes to technology and its use in the educational ecosystem in Pakistan. But trust me, it's a sea change as far as I'm concerned, from what I have seen. And this is now the one of the big issues facing companies like us, for example. Incidentally, we are in the forefront of a lot of things that happened here because there was a national education challenge thrown up by a government-sponsored incubator during COVID. And we, out of 150 startups that applied for that, we ended up in the top 10 in that challenge. So that has kind of put us in the forefront of this thing. And one of the biggest challenges that we are facing now is that they are talking about reopening the schools later this month or early in October. And we have to keep reminding the schools now that, listen, just because their kids are back in school does not mean that you forget the lessons that you have learned from the career and how important technology can be as a tool for your education. And I think it's a start, but it's an extremely important start. If this lockdown wasn't there, maybe it would have taken us years. I'm not talking about weeks or months. I'm talking about years to spread that kind of an awareness about the use of technology in the educational ecosystem. Now it's already there.
No, great, thank you. And I think that's an extremely valuable point, as we see many schools that and systems that have opened up, some that are starting to, and some that are, planning and are in the phase of trying to make considerations, how we can ensure that we're able to leverage all of the innovations and learning that have taken shape and sort of bring those in as schools adapt and transition and reopen. So I want to ask all panelists to reflect, and I'll go around to each of you. If you had sort of one piece of advice, considering schools are looking at sort of a phased reopening or different systems are reopening, what's been one of the experiences, one of the lessons learned from your current implementations of your solutions that you would want them to keep in mind as governments are planning, as teachers, as parents are planning for the reopening of schools? How can we leverage, and particularly, I think, reflecting on this notion of play, what's one consideration you'd like them to have? And as everyone's taking a moment to think, I'm also just going to say for anyone who's watching online, if you do have a question or if you have an answer to that question, please post it into the chat. So we can hear from you as well, what your reflections are and any questions you have from the group. But now, hopefully that everyone's thought a little bit about that. Kenneth, can I go to you first? What would be your reflection, either for those in Singapore or outside globally? What's an important consideration that they should have?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So I think in Singapore, as you can probably tell, we have been fairly blessed. And our schools have been open since June. And I think if it's just one lesson that I'd like to share one reflection, just an iteration of my earlier point that children are social animals. Not animals. Children are social. Children are So play is more than just a frivolous activity, as we know as educators, and everybody in this panel knows. But since you're talking about messaging, I think play is more than just a frivolous activity, and play is inherently part of how the child seeks to understand the world, and the child seeks to understand the world through social others. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Wonderful. And that was nice and concise. And I'm going to ask all of the speakers to do the same, just so we can go through everyone. So Wendy, I know you're not meant to present on this, but given that you're also on screen, I wonder if you'll share with us what would be your takeaway or recommendation.
Yeah, I think that this has been, I'm living in Mexico, so schools are still closed, and there's not really any immediate solution for reopening. I think we're waiting to lower COVID levels, but I think one of the things that I've seen in World Reader's work, and then in some of my other work with the University of Notre Dame, is really the power of strengthening the home learning environment. And as we go back to sort of this new normalcy, not to drop that piece. I think that that's really, really critical. And I think that many people have scrambled for ways and solutions to engage parents and engage caregivers and not to let those go. And then I think to really address the social and emotional needs of all actors in the system, whether they be teachers, whether they be the students themselves, the parents. I mean, this has been a global pandemic. And I think to go back to school sort of thinking, great, we're all in the classroom again, we just have to follow certain hygiene, restrictions and we're going to be fine. I think that that would be really a loss. And I think play in particular can obviously play a huge role in alleviating some of the emotional stressors. It can build community again, which is a really key piece, particularly as we see even some schools reopening in a mixed, a hybrid model where we don't have, the traditional opportunities to build community in the teacher cafeteria area or in on the recreation field. And how do we use play to address those emotional needs and build that community? Because I think that it would be underestimating the impact of COVID to ignore those needs. And I think play is a great avenue to address them.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think that builds off of Kenneth's point as well, about us being social creatures, not just children, but I think all of us. Judith, I've seen you're unmuted. You want to go next?
Yeah, it just resonates with me. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to sort of contribute to overall well-being of children in very difficult circumstances, and education is one avenue. We've proven that actually we can contribute through Can't Wait to Learn also to diminished psychosocial support and support them. So maybe this is now wider also to the parents. So both contributions really resonate with me. And I would say, if you say to teachers, yeah, bring the play into your normal schooling. And start, when you start school with the children, contributing to where they, not where the teachers left the children, but where the children are at the moment, and check, what's worked for them and what not. And another thing that, maybe you wanted to contribute is I think we could have gone much further if, we would have sort of partnered much wider and we had that more established. So what Marva's doing, is because we're very established there, a fantastic team, or the whole infrastructure is there on the ground. But you don't have that everywhere. But we have, also in this group, quite an infrastructure to build on. So that's also something I think we should do more in the future.
Great, thank you so much for that, Judith. Maybe I'll go next to Lisa, picking up on this idea of partnership and community. It's been great to see so many organizations represented within your program, but what would be your advice from the World Vision perspective?
I'll be really brief because Wendy and Judith and everyone answered so well some of my same thoughts. But I mean, I think my major point would be to focus on system strengthening. We always say we want to focus on system strengthening, but to reevaluate that, what that looks like is what we've been talking about, is the home needs to be a part of that system. Strengthening the homeschool connection, what we've gained now, let's not lose that. And to even as part of that system, there are other influencers, networks that need to support that system. It's not just school and government and sort of more traditional structures, but in a situation like this or in crisis, we need to be a little more inventive of, who is in the system And the home is a critical part of that, play being across the home and school as well.
Fantastic. No, I think that's really, really important. And I really like that you not just talked about system strengthening, but reevaluating what that means. And I do think that's the key piece to really dig into. Aamer, can I go over to you? What would be your advice? I think you kicked us off with this really reflective question. So if you had to synthesize it down to one piece, what would that look like?
Jackie, I think I'll be pretty much echoing what everybody's already said, but for me, two very important takeaways from this lockdown period that we've gone through. One is an emerging realization that gaming is not a dirty word, but a critical part of the learning process. And two, what I think Merva said earlier, that education, it's such a vast area that there's no one size that fits all. So cooperation between EdTechs, working together between EdTechs, just like KarMuqabla is working with a wide set of teachers from various schools in creating content. Similarly, I think we need to find opportunities where different EdTechs with different products and different kinds of approaches towards imparting education need to put their head together and say that, okay, where their efforts are overlapping and where they can economize by cooperating. So I think in that sense, it's been a very, very important period for all of us.
Fantastic. No, that's great. Marwa, anything to add?
So I'll just give an example on the context in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we're going to follow the hybrid learning. And this reiterates again what we said and what now Aamer emphasized again, which is that one solution does not fit all. It could be through hybrid learning. It could be through, it's about assessing the needs and contextualizing what we have to respond to children's need and to respond to the context. Another thing is having this triangular relationship, which is based on having parents, on having teachers and children involved. It can't be without any of these components. When we have this interaction, it would give best results. And when we talk about playing, wherever children are, whether they're at home, at schools, even as we would all enjoy playing, and concepts would be smoother when it's through play. It will just be stuck in our minds in a smooth that we would never forget. I've never forgotten anything that I learned through playing, but I forgot all the theories that I've been taught.
No, a great point, and I must say it's quite telling that every time each one of you started to talk about play, a smile emerged on your face. And I think that also just is very reminiscent of how powerful play can be, even to adults and to children. Yeah. I think there's been some really great points that have been highlighted through the chat, also picking up on some of the great comments around looking at system strengthening and including home in this, as well as that the pandemic has forced us to rethink education and how children learn during these uncertain times. And I think it's a fantastic to use this as a moment for learning and for taking it sort of the next step forward. And so I've got one final question. We've got 2 minutes left, and I will keep us to time, noting that we've got another session going on. But I just want to reflect, coming from the UN Refugee Agency, you know, looking at crises and looking at being able to learn in crises and being able to push learning and innovation forward in these times. How can we make sure within each of your interventions in the programs that you bring, but also as a sector, how can we ensure that this play, games, learning is happening in some of the most remote corners of the world, and is, you know, targeting some of the most marginalized communities? So quick thoughts, and I'll just invite those who want to contribute to this question to come online and do so. So yeah, Aamer, do you want to go first?
Quickly, Jackie, I think we are getting very, very good catering to all in Pakistan. There are 6 major languages spoken in Pakistan. So making content, gaming content available in local languages, I think it's a great way of spreading what we're doing. It quite effective, I think.
Fantastic. Judith, I saw you were about to come in. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, knowing the context and having people on the ground who can actually know and even under these circumstances relate to this. And I would say use that as your indicator of success. You know, if you've been able to reach these children, then you know we are right. But it's difficult. You make trade-offs because you want to reach a lot of children. They want to do it fast, but it's really important to keep that in mind.
Great.
Oh,
go ahead, Wendy.
I might just add, I think there are many really positive examples of how education, play-based programming is reaching more and more vulnerable communities. And I think the power of it comes again from partnership. No one can do it alone. And whether it's education emergencies or whether it's, you know, very rural communities in Appalachia, I mean, there's a lot of profound equity issues that I think education emergencies bring to light. But that through partnership, whether it be with technology organizations, whether it be with community-based organizations, ministries, and weaving that socio-ecological model around the child and coming up with solutions that are flexible, that are going to work in a lot of different contexts and that are mobile, that can move with families. I think that these are really key principles that we have to think about when we try to reach some of the most vulnerable.
Wonderful. No, thank you for that. And okay, Marwa, very quickly, because we're just at time. Yes. So the final word from you.
Yeah, I'll add up to Wendy. It's about empowering the community because usually we reach children through community. So just by the fact that we're empowering them, we're giving them the leadership of implementation, it makes it happen.
Great. That's a wonderful closing word. And so with that, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our presenters and panelists today. One, for your flexibility and showcasing that, you know, within these contexts, we need to be adaptable, even when technology is creating some challenges for us. But I think all of you have done a fantastic job, not only in representing your projects and solutions, but joining this conversation and kind of advancing the discussion forward. And I can't wait to see how all of your programs take shape in the next coming months. So a big thank you to everyone. And just to say, continue engaging. The next session will be on at 11. So do feel free to reach out to any of the panelists in the networking part of this application. And we look forward to seeing you in the further discussion. So a very big thank you.